High on the windswept towers of Cyrannus IV, beneath an open sky that shimmered with twin moons, Princess Arya Valen stood on the marble dais of the Grand Hall of Crystals. Her silver hair caught the pale light, and her violet eyes shone with calm authority. Around her the court gathered in a silent ring, advisors in long robes of iridescent thread, diplomats from nearby star systems, and honored guests whose faces glowed in the crystal reflections. Today was unlike any other day in living memory. Queen Sereth, Arya's mother, had summoned an envoy from Earth, a lone human called Captain Jonah Hale. No Cyrannus diplomat had ever met a human face-to-face, though the two worlds had exchanged messages for years. The appearance of a representative from the distant blue planet stirred curiosity and unease in equal measure. The great doors of the hall opened with a soft hiss. All eyes turned. Jonah emerged, stepping onto the polished floor with steady confidence. He wore simple armor, smooth plates of dark metal that seemed less rigid than Cyrannus' ceremonial dress. His helmet hung at his side, revealing a clean-shaven face and warm brown eyes. A low murmur passed through the crowd. To some he looked bold and brave. To others, he seemed a simple stranger, far from home. Arya watched him with a raised eyebrow. She had studied Earth history in her lessons, read scraps of human poetry, and seen images of their machines in glowing hollow displays. Humans had fought countless wars to win their freedom, had battled to tame their wild world. Among all those fierce warriors, how could any one human stand here, unarmed in a foreign court, and claim respect? Queen Sereth rose from her throne, of woven crystal filaments. In her hand she held a small, orb-like microphone that carried her voice clearly to every corner of the hall. "Today," she began, "we welcome Captain Jonah Hale of Earth. He comes not as a conqueror, but as a friend. Let his presence mark the first step in a new age of unity between our worlds." Jonah stepped forward, bowed deeply, and his voice rang out across the silent hall. "Your Majesty, Princess Arya, honored members of the court, I thank you for this welcome. I come with goodwill from the people of Earth. We seek peace and knowledge, and hope our paths will join kindly with yours." A polite ripple of applause echoed around the chamber. Yet as the last hands fell away, Princess Arya could no longer hold back. A fast, bright laugh escaped her lips. It rang out sharp and clear, bouncing off the crystal walls like bird calls at dawn. All fell silent. Even Queen Sereth's clipped breath caught. The courtiers stared at Arya, surprised by her bold mockery. Arya herself felt no shame. She saw only a human standing alone, far from the fire of his homeworld, and it struck her as comical. How could this one man carry the weight of Earth's hopes? Jonah straightened, meeting her gaze without anger. His calm brown eyes did not flicker with hurt or rage. Instead, they held a spark of curiosity, as though he wondered why she laughed. The courtiers shifted uneasily. Some glared at the princess, others averted their eyes. Queen Sereth's voice cut through the hush. "Princess Arya," she said softly but firmly, "this is not a plaything. Treat our guest with respect." Her eyes met her daughter's. "Come, let us continue." Arya's cheeks warmed. She dipped her head in a graceful bow, all the more elaborate for its formality. "Forgive my laughter, Captain," she said. "Your armor is unusual, if I may say so." Even she winced at the thin politeness of her words. Jonah inclined his head once. "I understand," he said. His voice held no trace of offense. "In our culture, we wear what feels most practical. In time, I hope you will see its purpose." With that, Queen Sereth resumed the ceremony. Advisors brought forward precious gifts from Earth's rich stores, a cube of polished wood that sang when tapped, seeds from a red-flowered tree that flourished in rain, and a sheet of metal that formed itself into any shape the holder desired. In return, Cyrannus offered crystalline sculptures that shifted color with each movement, scrolls of living history that spoke aloud in luminous letters, and an orb of liquid starlight that pulsed like a heartbeat. Arya watched each exchange with cool interest. She noticed how Jonah handled each Sereni's gift, with care, wonder, and a gentle touch. He asked questions. What melody does this wood sing? Will these seeds grow beneath twin moons? How long does this starlight pulse? His voice carried neither condescension nor awe, only honest curiosity. At the close of the ceremony, Queen Sereth stepped forward. Let us break bread together, she said, gesturing to long tables laid with foods from each world. Dishes of glowing fungi, spiced meats from earth, sweet crystal petals, and earth fruits adapted to Serranus growing conditions lined the tables. Friendship must be forged in conversation as much as treaty, the queen declared. The courtiers formed small groups around the tables. Guards at the edges wore quiet expressions, hands resting on hilts of ceremonial swords they would not draw. Arya followed her mother, trailing at a polite distance. Jonah moved among the guests, smiling, and greeting each new face. When he passed Arya, she saw him glance down at his plate. A delicate fungus cap glowed pale blue under his slow fingers. He bit it, chewed thoughtfully, then smiled. That is delicious, he said quietly. It tastes like sweet rain. Arya blinked. No human should praise such fungi. Only Serranus chefs knew how to coax the hidden sweetness. He had found wonder where she expected disdain. With steady calm, she said, I take it you like our foods, then? He nodded. Everything here feels new and strange, yet in its own way it feels right. She frowned, puzzled by his quiet warmth. He spoke of her world not as an alien land of oddities, but as a place of gifts. Perhaps she had judged too swiftly. Come, Queen Sereth said, leading the royal party to a small balcony overlooking the city. Gone was the hush of ceremony. Now a gentle breeze carried the distant hum of city life, the faint glow of starships circling the towers, and the soft glow of twin moons overhead. Princess, her mother said, voice low, this meeting will shape the future of Serranus. You must learn from Captain Hale. Watch him. Talk with him. Learn how he thinks. Arya's heart fluttered. To shadow the envoy, to learn from a human, this was unheard of. But in her veins, she felt curiosity rise, unbidden. Yes, mother, she said. Jonah stood nearby, gazing out at the city below. He turned when he saw Arya approach. Princess Arya, he greeted, bowing once more. Thank you for sharing this view. She studied him in silence a moment, then surprised herself by asking, why would Earth want alliance with Serranus? We have no soldiers, no armies. We defend ourselves with words and crystals. Jonah smiled gently. Words can be stronger than swords if they are true. Your people have learned peace over centuries. On Earth, we still learn that lesson. We hope your wisdom can guide us. Arya breathed in night air scented with the perfume of silken vines. She saw his warm eyes, his steady posture, and felt the first stirrings of respect. The laughter that had tumbled from her lips before seemed childish now. In its place rose a cautious hope. As you wish, she said softly. I will learn your ways, Captain. Show me what it means to stand together without force. He inclined his head. And I will learn yours, Princess. Together we can build something new. In that quiet moment, the twin moons shone down, casting long silver beams across the balcony. Within those beams, a human and a Serranus princess stood side by side, each eager to learn from the other. Arya Valen felt a shift in her heart. The scornful laugh had faded, and in its place bloomed the first seed of something powerful. A friendship that might one day change the stars. Princess Arya Valen rose with the pale dawn light on Serranus IV, her silver hair brushing the polished floor of her private chamber. She remembered her promise to Captain Jonah Hale. She would learn his ways, as he learned hers. Today, her mother had arranged for Arya to accompany Jonah through the city's living market, to see how he spoke with common citizens. The royal escort would be there, but Arya knew this was no mere ceremony. It was a lesson, Jonah waited in the courtyard below, leaning against a smooth column of crystal. He wore his simple armor again, and when he saw Arya emerge, he bowed. "Good morning, princess," he said. His tone was soft, free of the stiff formality of Cyrana's court. Arya could not help but smile. "Good morning, Captain," she answered. "Lead the way." They stepped into the living market, a vast open space under a canopy of glowing vines. Stalls of every color offered goods from across the galaxy. Singing seeds, soft metals that hummed in the hand, bright fabrics that shifted hue with the wearer's breath. Cyrana's citizens moved among the booths with easy grace. Arya's royal guard followed at a respectful distance. Jonah moved among the people as if he belonged. He greeted each seller with a nod, asked about their day, and barred no question, no matter how small. He lifted a bowl of purple fruit and bit into it. He rolled the flesh on his tongue, smiled, and said, "This tastes like spring rain." The fruit seller's eyes widened, and she bowed to him in thanks. Arya watched Jonah's gentle manner. He spoke simply, without hidden meaning. He listened, really listened, to each person's answer. A weaver who sold cloth that grew warmer in winter praised him for his kindness to all, even strangers. A metalsmith offered him a small tool for his travels. Students shyly asked him about Earth schools. Jonah answered each with respect. When they reached a stall of Earth goods, bright glass spheres that captured light and cast rainbow patterns, Arya hesitated. In the palace, such items were prized curiosities. She expected Jonah to summon awe, to treat them as treasures. Instead, he turned the sphere in his hand, let it roll until it clicked shut, and said, "On Earth, children play with these, but we use them to study light. I find them fascinating because they teach us how to bend what we see." Arya frowned. On Cyrannus, beauty was prized above all. Functional tools were plain. Yet here was a human, an alien to her world, finding wonder in everyday things. She felt a small pang of envy. What simple joy was she missing in her royal life? As they continued, Jonah paused at a fountain fed by glowing water. He knelt, cupped his hands, and drank deeply. The water burned cold with energy. A guard tensed, ready to protest that this spot was off limits. But Jonah only smiled and offered the princess a drink. Arya looked from the fountain to her mother's guards, then to Jonah. She bent and drank. The water tasted of moonlight and fresh wind. She felt a spark of life in her chest. Jonah stood and wiped his mouth on his sleeve. "Fresh water is a gift," he said. "On Earth we fight and die for clean streams. Here, you let it flow for all." Arya met his eyes. She had never thought of water that way. In the royal palace, fountains and rivers were ornaments. Here, the fountain was a shared blessing. She felt her cheeks warm, thinking of her own people's waste and disregard. They moved on to a stall selling small living plants. The vendor coaxed the plants to bloom by gentle humming. Jonah listened, then hummed himself, a low, simple tune. The plants leaned toward his voice. The vendor laughed in delight and told Jonah his song reminded her of a warm summer breeze on Earth. Arya watched in wonder. "You can do that?" she asked. Jonah grinned. "On Earth we find many ways to share life. We sing to seeds, to hearts, to each other. It reminds us we are alive." Arya thought of the stiff court songs she had practiced since childhood. They were beautiful but distant, sung only to please nobles. Jonah's song reached living creatures. She felt a stirring of longing to learn that tune. A nearby group of children gathered, whispering. Jonah knelt and met their wide eyes. A little girl asked, "Captain, do humans really have two hearts?" Arya raised an eyebrow. Cyrannus bodies had 3 hearts, beating in shimmering rhythms. Humans had only one. Jonah shook his head. "No, just one. But it can grow stronger if you use it to care for others." The children looked puzzled but inspired. A boy asked him to teach the tune he hummed. Jonah took the boy's hand and guided him in the simple melody. The child's voice cracked at first, then found the notes. The vendor's plants leaned again. The children laughed and danced around Jonah. Arya's heart fluttered as she watched, and she felt something warm bloom inside her own chest. Soon the time came for the midday pledge at the Crystal Gate, where each citizen offered a tiny crystal shard to the gate in memory of, or hope for, a better future. The gate held thousands of shards in shifting patterns of light. Today the queen had asked Jonah and Arya to place the first shards. At the gate, Arya picked up a pale violet crystal. She recalled lessons taught by her tutors. Each crystal held one memory or one wish, sealed by the giver's energy. She expected a solemn, carefully crafted shard. Instead, Jonah lifted a rough, clear shard, one he said was broken in his eyes. "This shard fell from my ship's hull," he explained. "I hold it to remember Earth's journey to you." He closed his fingertips around the shard. After a moment, Arya saw the faint flicker of his memory. Children waving in sunlight, engines humming like silver bees, and vast oceans rising and falling in moonlight. Then the shard glowed with that memory. He placed it into the gate. Arya's breath caught. She chose her own shard, the violet stone of her tutor's first lesson. A memory of her mother teaching her to read the living scrolls. A calm memory of her childhood laughter in the palace halls. She sealed it, placed it in the gate, and felt her own memory glow in a soft pulse of light. The gate shimmered and sang with the two energies. Citizens gathered, eyes bright. Arya realized the power of shared memory. Here was no distant ceremony. This was a living bond between worlds. After the ceremony, Jonah and Arya walked through the hall of tapestries that told the history of Seranus. Wars, treaties, discoveries. Jonah studied each scene with gentle questions. What led to peace here? How did your people choose forgiveness? Seranus scholars hovered, answering in formal tones. Jonah listened and nodded, then asked, "And what lesson did that teach you?" Arya watched the interplay. On Earth, people learned through stories too. But often stories ended in tragedy. Here, stories ended in hope. Jonah admired that. He asked scholars not only about events, but about the feelings behind each choice. He wrote notes in his small journal, sketching faces and phrases. He asked for more details. He pressed for the human side of Seranus history. Arya felt pride swell for her people and curiosity about herself. Which moments had shaped her? Which memories did she carry? She realized she had never asked herself these things. She had studied history as fact, not as living emotions. As afternoon stretched low, Arya and Jonah paused in a quiet courtyard. A single crystal tree stood at its center, its leaves tinkling as light winds passed. Jonah turned to her. "You have great strength, princess," he said. "Your people built peace, but strength does not lie only in diplomacy. It lies in the courage to understand others, to stand in another's shoes." Arya nodded slowly. "And you, Captain, have shown me that simplicity can hold power. A song, a smile, a question can unlock more than any decree." He offered his hand. "Will you teach me more of Seranus' ways?" She placed her hand in his. "And you will teach me more of humanity." They stood beneath the tinkling crystals, promise and curiosity weaving between them. Each had come to learn from the other. In that gentle exchange, Arya felt the laugh of scorn that opened her eyes, now replaced by laughter of wonder. And she knew that the lessons of this day would bind their worlds in ways no force of arms ever could. A pale hush settled over the peace garden at dawn. Silver pathways wound among glassy ponds and softly glowing flowers. In the very center stood the great crystal bloom, an enormous flower of living crystal that pulsed with gentle light. For centuries its health had mirrored the peace between Seranus and its allies. Today, however, its petals lay dull and its glow had all but faded. Princess Arya Valen arrived first, summoned by an urgent message from Queen Sereth. Her silver hair trailed over the marble floor as she hurried through the moonlit corridors. Her heart beat fast with worry. The crystal bloom had never weakened so. At the garden gate she found Captain Jonah Hale pacing beneath a canopy of living vines. His brow was furrowed, and he carried the human equivalent of a scientific satchel, a leather case full of instruments he had asked to borrow from the royal scholars. Jonah looked up when Arya approached. "The bloom's energy reading is near 0, he said quietly. "I've seen dying plants on Earth, but nothing like this." He opened his satchel and lifted a compact device. A small screen showed a flat line where a slow rhythm should pulse. "It's as if its life force has been cut off at the roots." Arya took a trembling breath. "If it dies, the accord falters. The worlds will fear the treaty is broken." She touched the bloom's outer petal. It felt cold and lifeless under her fingers. "Queen Sereth will be devastated." They knelt together. Jonah gently placed a small probe against the base of the bloom. On his device, he cycled through readings of crystalline resonance, bioenergetic, flow and environmental variables, humidity, light intensity, soil nutrients. All scores were alarmingly low. "None of these are in the danger zone," he said, "but the bloom is failing anyway. It needs something we're missing." Arya glanced around the garden. Statues of past diplomats stood silent at the edges. Water trickled in fountains and the twin moons cast soft light through clear domes overhead. Yet the atmosphere felt still, heavy. "In Cyranus lore," she said, "the bloom answers to our collective hope. When fear or anger grows, its strength fades." She closed her eyes, recalling the laughter of earlier days, the shared moments with Jonah. Could it be fear? Jonah watched her intently. "Fear is powerful," he agreed. "On Earth, we know plants respond to sound and emotion. In some cultures, people sing to their crops to help them grow." He tapped his satchel. "What if the bloom needs to hear our hope to feel our unity?" Arya's lips curved in a faint smile. "Then perhaps we have something to offer." She rose and held out her hand. "Come, Captain. Will you help me show the bloom what peace means to us?" He took her hand, standing. Together they walked through the garden toward a grove of smaller crystal blooms that still glowed faintly. Arya raised her voice in the ancient Cyranus hymn of unity, a soft rising melody taught by her mother. Jonah watched her for a moment, then closed his eyes and joined in, his human tone blending with her clear, crystalline notes. At first, only their two voices rang in the night air, mingling with the gentle hum of the garden. Then as they moved toward the giant bloom, the smaller flowers brightened, releasing ripples of light that danced along the paths. The petals of the great bloom quivered, as though stirred by their song. Arya and Jonah pressed on, their voices steady, weaving a promise of trust. Safe within the bloom's chamber, they stood before the giant petals. Jonah set down his satchel, drawing out a simple human instrument, a small wind-driven chime that played soft tones when the breeze passed through. He held it aloft, letting the moonlit wind catch its hollow tubes. A gentle, haunting sound drifted across the chamber. Arya smiled. "On Cyranus, we use words and crystal. On Earth, you use music and wind." She touched the bloom's base once more. "Let us try both." Jonah nodded. He placed the chime against the bloom and Arya resumed her hymn. The chime's whispers intertwined with her song. Slowly, the bloom's petals trembled. Faint lines of light traced along the veins of crystal, pulsing in time with their music. But the bloom shuddered, then shivered violently. Pieces of shattered crystal fell to the ground with soft clinks. Arya stepped back, alarmed. Jonah reached out, covering the broken fragments with his hand. "It's in pain," he said. "The bloom is old and wounded. It needs healing, not only hope." Arya glanced at her mother's gardeners who hovered at the edges. She called to them, "Bring the elixir of restored light, the one you save for the purest emergency." The gardeners hurried away, their lamps casting long shadows. Minutes later, they returned with small vials of a glowing liquid, the distilled essence of the garden's purest blooms. The gardeners knelt, laying the vials at the bloom's base. Arya whispered an ancient blessing. "May light return to the heart of unity." Jonah mirrored her gesture with a human prayer. "May peace flow stronger than fear." Slowly, a gardener poured the elixir into a carved channel at the bloom's roots. The liquid spread like quicksilver, seeping into the crystal. Faint warmth rose under Arya's palm as she lowered her hand. Jonah placed his own palm beside hers, and together they pressed into the cool petals. At first, nothing happened. Then, a slow pulse of pale violet light emerged from the bloom's core. It grew brighter with each beat. The broken fragments around them vibrated, reforming, clicking back into place. Within moments, the crystal bloom stood whole again, its petals gleaming with renewed life. A hush fell, followed by a soft sigh of relief. The smaller blooms around the garden flared into vivid luminescence. Fountains bubbled with clear, sparkling water. The statues of diplomats seemed to glow in approval. Arya and Jonah rose, hair damp with sweat and hearts pounding. She turned to him with wide eyes. "You were right," she said, voice trembling. "Hope and care, both are needed to heal." He smiled, tired but triumphant. Queen Sereth appeared at the garden gate, her regal form framed by moonlight. She walked forward, her eyes shining with pride. "You have saved the bloom, and with it the future of unity," she declared. She reached out, placing a hand on Arya's shoulder and another on Jonah's. "Together, you have shown that peace is built by many hands, by many voices." Arya felt emotion swell within her. She bowed to her mother, then to Jonah. Tears of joy glistened in her violet eyes. Jonah stood tall, offering her a respectful bow. Around them, the court and the gardeners knelt in reverence to the restored bloom. In that moment, Arya knew that the alliance between Seranus and Earth had passed its greatest test. The crystal bloom lived again, not by tradition alone, but by the meeting of two worlds, by song and by science, by ancient blessing and human ingenuity. And at its heart bloomed the bond between a princess and a human warrior, standing side by side in triumph. Late that evening, the sky above Seranus IV glowed with a million distant stars. In the great throne room of the Crystal Palace, torches flickered against walls of polished quartz. Queen Sereth sat upon her throne, her regal form bathed in soft light. Princess Arya Valin entered hesitantly, her silver hair brushing the marble floor. At her side stood Captain Jonah Hale, still wearing his simple earth armor. The court's courtiers and ambassadors formed a quiet circle around them, their eyes bright with curiosity. Queen Sereth's voice echoed in the hall. "My daughter and honored friend from Earth, you both have shown great courage and unity. Tonight, you breathed new life into the crystal bloom, and with it hope for all worlds. Now it is time for another truth. One long hidden must come to light." Arya's heart fluttered. She glanced at Jonah, who offered a gentle nod. The queen rose, her gown of living crystal flowing like water. She stepped down from the throne and approached the pair. With graceful hands, she reached into her robes and drew out a small crystal pendant, a simple, clear gem that caught the torchlight in dazzling flashes. "This crystal," Queen Sereth said, her voice soft, "holds a secret of our past. Many cycles ago, during the first spiral crisis, I stood on the front lines of darkness, defending Seranus with every ounce of my strength. At my side was a brave envoy of Earth, Captain Jonah Hale." She paused, and in the silence, Arya felt the air grow thick. Jonah's breath caught. He looked at the queen, then at Arya. The courtiers stared in stunned silence. Only the torches crackled. Queen Sereth held the pendant aloft. "This envoy and I fought together. We shared laughter in dire hours. We dreamed of peace in endless nights. From our union came a child, my daughter, Princess Arya Valin." She laid the pendant gently in Arya's hand. "He is your father." For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. Arya stared down at the crystal in her palm. The world spun around her. She looked to Jonah. His brown eyes glistened in the torchlight. He reached out with trembling fingers and touched the edge of her hand. Arya's breath burst free. "Father?" she whispered, her voice trembling. She felt tears burn in her eyes. Even though she could not remember her own first steps, could not recall the face of her father, something deep within her stirred at that single word. Jonah's voice was soft. Arya, he said. His words caught in his throat. The courtiers stood like statues. Queen Sereth placed a hand on each of their shoulders. Go to each other, she urged. Find the words that years of duty kept hidden. Arya's legs buckled, and Jonah caught her gently. She sank to her knees before him. He knelt as well, so they were eye to eye. Around them, the royal guards bowed their heads, that none might intrude on this moment. Arya looked at Jonah's face closely, his strong jaw, his warm eyes, the faint lines at the corners of his mouth. In that moment, she saw someone both foreign and familiar. She lifted her hand, trembling, and placed it against his cheek. Why did you leave? She asked, voice thick with confusion and pain. Jonah swallowed. He closed his eyes for a moment and drew in a steady breath. Duty, he said simply. After the crisis, the Council of Earth demanded my return. They feared our worlds would grow too close, that politics would be complicated by love between species. I begged to stay, but I had to choose between Earth's command or the safety of Serranus. I chose my duty. He bowed his head. I carried your mother's heart, and your own with me always. Arya's tears slipped down her cheeks. She pressed her palm against his chest over his heart. You carried me, she said, voice breaking. I never knew. I grew up with only echoes of stories. I felt an empty space inside. She looked up into his eyes. All this time I thought I was alone. Jonah gently took her hand and held it to his lips. You were never alone, he whispered. I watched over you from afar. I visited in secret, leaving small gifts, songs, seeds, of earth flowers that grew beneath your moonlight. I watched you laugh, remembered your first words, written in a small scroll I kept close. He reached into his satchel and drew out a tiny rolled parchment sealed with red wax. Arya's fingers trembled as she broke the seal and unrolled the parchment. Written in fine script were her first words, taught by her mother. Light unites us. Beneath them, in another hand, were lines Jonah had written. My daughter, you are the light between worlds. Arya looked up, tears pooling in her violet eyes. She flung herself forward and embraced Jonah. He wrapped his arms around her, careful in his armor, and held her close. Arya felt his strength, gentle but unbreakable, and for the first time, she felt safe. Around them, the courtiers and diplomats bowed, tears in many eyes. Queen Sereth stepped forward and laid a hand on each of them. My brave Arya, the queen said, her voice trembling with emotion. You are both stronger than any secret. Your bond will lead our worlds to a future we could never have dreamed. Arya pulled back slightly and looked between her mother and her father. She saw love shining in each of their faces. In that moment, she felt a surge of belonging she had never known. The emptiness inside her filled with warmth, a gift of family finally whole. Jonah rose to his full height. He looked at the assembled court. My people have long sought unity with Serranus, he said, voice clear and strong. But my greatest hope now is to stand with my daughter and my queen beside me. Together, we will build a future of peace. The courtiers broke into applause, soft at first, then swelling in waves. Torches flared brighter as if in celebration. Arya smiled through her tears, looking at Jonah's proud face. The distance of years vanished in that instant. Queen Sereth lifted Arya's hand. Daughter, raise your voice and declare the bond of our family to all worlds. Arya drew a steady breath and spoke clearly. Let every being know that humanity and Serranus are bound by more than treaties. We are bound by blood and by hope. Jonah bowed his head in respect to Arya, then to Queen Sereth. And I, he said, renew my vow to protect our daughter and our alliance with every breath and every beat of my heart. In the grand throne room, beneath the glow of crystal and torchlight, the royal family, mother, daughter, and father, stood united. Somewhere far beyond the walls of the palace, the crystal bloom pulsed with renewed vigor, echoing their bond. The promise of a new era shone brighter than any star. and at its center stood a princess who laughed no more in scorn, but laughed with joy, knowing her father at last. The morning sun rose over Seranus IV in soft rosy light. In the palace courtyard, long tables draped with woven crystal cloth gleamed in the dawn. Representatives from Earth and Seranus stood side by side, the air alive with quiet excitement. At the head of the courtyard stood Princess Arya Valen, flanked by her mother, Queen Sereth, and her father, Captain Jonah Hale. Today they would sign the Unity Accord and open a new chapter for both worlds. Arya looked around at the gathered crowd. Seranus senators in robes of shimmering silver stood beside Earth diplomats in plain but purposeful attire. Students from both worlds exchanged shy greetings. Engineers and scholars carried instruments and scrolls of joint research. Even gardeners who had tended the Peace Garden's revival traveled here to witness the moment. Arya's heart swelled. This was more than a ceremony. It was the living promise born of her own journey. Jonah stepped forward to speak. His voice rang clear in the hushed courtyard. Today we bind our worlds together in purpose and in peace. We commit to share knowledge, to learn from each other's strengths, and to stand as one family in the face of any challenge. He paused, eyes meeting Arya's. And we do so as a family. Arya felt a surge of pride. Her own voice carried strongly as she added, On Earth we learned that hope can cross oceans. On Cyranus they learned that friendship can bloom in crystal soil. Now we unite our hopes and our dreams that no star may stand alone. Queen Sereth stood, her regal presence filling the space. Let this accord be more than words on a page. Let it guide our acts of kindness, our sharing of art and science, our commitment to understanding. From this day forth, Seranus and Earth walked together. With those words, Arya and Jonah approached the long table. Before them lay two pens, one carved from Seranus crystal, one forged from Earth steel. Arya dipped the crystal pen into a bowl of glowing ink and wrote her name, each stroke glowing in silver light. Jonah followed with the Earth steel pen, his letters firm and sure. As they finished, a gentle breeze stirred through the courtyard, carrying petals of the revived crystal bloom like confetti. A chorus of applause rose, but Arya raised her hand for silence. Let us seal this accord in a sign of our shared future, she said. Nearby, the Peace Garden's caretakers rolled forward a small living sapling, a hybrid seedling grown from earth roots and Seranus pollen. Its leaves shimmered with both emerald green and pale violet. Together, Arya and Jonah planted the sapling in a crystal planter at the courtyard center. Arya poured a bowl of earth water, a clear liquid drawn from a spring near Jonah's home, into the planter. Jonah sprinkled glowing nutrient dust from Seranus fields over the roots. The sapling absorbed the water and dust with a soft, satisfying hum, its young leaves trembling in life. Queen Sereth and Earth's lead diplomat each touched the sapling's trunk, palms open in blessing. Light spread from the sapling's core, reflecting in the eyes of all who watched. In that silent moment, the courtyard felt alive with possibility. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed into smaller groups. Arya led her father toward the newly built Academy of United Worlds, a glass and crystal tower rising beside the palace. Within its walls, classrooms glowed with ambient light, and corridors housed living murals that shifted to show Earth landscapes and Serani's histories in endless loops. Inside the main hall, a circle of chairs waited for the first council meeting of the Academy. Arya took her seat next to Jonah, who tapped a tablet showing diagrams of starship designs. I've proposed adding human engineering methods to your crystal propulsion systems, he said softly. Together we can build ships that travel farther than ever before. Arya smiled. And I will teach you the art of crystal weaving. How to shape living crystal into both strong hulls and living habitats. She traced a finger over a small crystal model on the table. Our combined designs will carry hope across the galaxy. A group of students entered, Seranus scholars in simple tunics, Earth cadets in sturdy uniforms. They bowed to Arya and Jonah. One young woman held a rolled chart of star routes. Princess Captain, we have plotted routes between our worlds. We need your approval to begin exploratory missions. Jonah studied the chart. These routes will cut travel time in half, he said, eyes bright. I approve. Let our first ships depart at dusk. Arya nodded. And I, she added, authorize the exchange of teachers and apprentices. Let every mind roam free in this academy. The students cheered softly, excitement shining in their faces. They unfurled star maps, humming with ideas. Arya and Jonah exchanged a look of satisfaction. The seeds they planted today would grow into forests of knowledge. Later, as the sun dipped low and the twin moons rose, Arya stood on the academy balcony. Below, engineers prepared the first joint starship, its hull made of living crystal plates interlaced with earth steel frames. Jonah joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. It almost feels like magic, Arya whispered, watching the ship's lights pulse in evening glow. Jonah smiled. Magic born from friendship and understanding. That is the true power we have unlocked. Arya leaned against him. In her mind, she saw the first voyages that would sail on this ship. Diplomats, carrying gifts of art and song, scientists seeking new worlds to study, ambassadors forging alliances with species unknown. Each mission would carry the story of two worlds that had once been strangers, now joined as family. Above them, the stars blinked in silent promise. On the horizon, the crystal bloom's light shimmered in the distance, echoing the rhythm of the new sapling they had planted. Arya felt her mother's words in her mind. Peace is built by many hands, by many voices. She turned to Jonah and spoke softly. Promise me we will always remember this day and why we came together. Jonah kissed her forehead. I promise. Every time we gaze at the stars, we will remember that unity is our greatest adventure. They stood together in the silver moonlight, two hearts bound across worlds, as the first joint starship lifted from the courtyard. Its engines hummed with crystal resonance and human fire. Slowly it soared into the night sky, a shining symbol of hope, carrying the dreams of Cyranus IV and Earth on its wings. And below, a princess and her human father watched it vanish, among the stars, knowing that their bond and the bond of their worlds would light the galaxy for generations to come.